Thank you for staying, even with the change in topic, or maybe you're here because of the change in topic, but get that. So the sort of pedagogic and halachic advice for the Seder, preparation for the Seder. And so I sort of have a few. I don't know that I've been hosting a Seder for a long time. I don't know particularly well, but I've been doing it for a relatively long time. So I'm going to share some of what I've learned and some strategies. I have a vivid memory of the first year that we hosted Seder. I guess it must have been spring 2009, our first Pesach in Princeton. I remember like my mother-in-law's car like pulled up in front of our house and like a cloud of dust, and then then the car zoomed off. The dust cloud, lifted, and they were like all the boxes of the Pesach dishes were there on the stoop in front, the sidewalk in front of our house. That's my memory, like a cartoon. That's my memory of it, and that was it. So so a handful of so I'll start with a pedagogic, and then I'll switch into the halachic, and then if anyone has questions, like you should ask questions. And what's nice about doing that now is that if I don't know the answer, I have time before Pesach to look it up. So that's the goal. Okay. First, so a few things we do, and I'll just again, either if it's useful you'll do it, if it's not useful you won't do it. But we some years ago we started having place cards for the Seder. It's an activity for the kids to do on Erev Pesach, and we found that thoughtful distribution of guests around the table makes for more efficient getting everyone settled, and can also, like if somebody has trouble hearing, put them, in a central location. If there's somebody who's going to be watching the young kids, and put them towards the end, or whatever theory. I mean, you can find online all sorts of theories of arranging people around the table, but like take a few minutes, like plan out and where you want people to sit, and then you can have your place cards around the table and do that. I just think it's like a little bit of thoughtfulness that ends up both efficiency and can like make the evening better that way.
Yeah. The other thing I did is one year, I always sat at the end of the table. And one year we had guests come and they brought people we didn't know.
Yeah.
Young couple. And they sat at the end of the table. All I did was talk. I learned that I sit in the middle of it.
Yes, that's very good to sit. Yeah, if you're leading, or if you're sitting in the middle is often a very good idea rather than sitting at the end. Agreed. If at the end you're sort of like you're very close to people right here, but then the people at the other end are very far away. In the middle, you're probably maximizing your
exposure
to as many people as possible, and so that can enable you to like facilitate a conversation, etc. Correct. Another thing we do, we have this we make little strips of paper that are I don't know, blue, yellow, red, whatever, it doesn't matter. Three colored strips of paper. We sort of cut them with a paper cutter or the scissors before Pesach. Everyone at the Seder has in front of them 3 strips of paper, and if the color could be, green is for a question, and yellow is for an answer, and red is for a comment or a story, something like that. And it's a way to encourage participation. So it's like a ticket. You can give out tickets also if you want, but they have quite they throw down their strip or their ticket to ask a question. We have bowls of candy distributed across the table, and if you ask a question or if you answer a question or you make a comment, you get a little little piece of candy tossed to you. It's just it's a way of like a tone setting moment at the beginning to facilitate conversation and participation. People feel empowered that way to like interrupt and ask things and sort of be more involved in the Seder. The actual like core of Magid, we tend to do fairly traditionally. We go around the table and people read paragraphs in whatever language they wish to do so, and that way we just sort of go through Magid in that way. We're not particularly creative in like deconstructing the Magid section like some people do, but we found that with that strip system, it encourages people to kind of interrupt and kind of engage in the text in a direct way in that way. We don't do like prepared divrei Torah, like even, which I know is like a thing that many schools will prepare or encourage kids to do. I sort of find that annoying. Whatever, that's my yeah. But yeah, speak louder for the you got a lot of people behind.
I found that if you have a large crowd and you're going around the table, people know they have to be aware, alert as it gets closer to them.
Oh, okay.
Whereas I just call people randomly.
Oh, okay. So for the cue that they have to stay on their toes. Very good.
Someone will say, "Where are we?"
Good. Okay. All right. That's one way to do it. That's good. That's good. We also, I don't mind if people aren't, like we also tell people, we start late and we go late and we say, if you need to take a nap, go to the couch, lie down, come back. Like we're not, no one's a prisoner. No one has to stay till the end. Like we really try to have diverse people at the Seder, and like just people have to leave sometimes, and that's fine. When we start our first, we started our careers on campus, and we would finish the Seder at 1:30 in the morning, and the students would get up from the Seder and be like, hey, like now where are we going? What now? What's next? And then when we left campus and we moved to Chicago, like that first Seder, we like wrapped up at like 11:45, and like half the guests had already left, and the ones that remained like staggered home. We were like, oh, it's a different stage of life, different abilities in terms of those things. So and any of that. So like no need again. So we try to set those grounds at the beginning. We really try to so like you want participation, you want engagement, but also people should feel. I feel like people want to zone out a little bit. They need to take a rest. They want to go lie down on the couch. That's also okay. Another kind of pedagogic choice we've made, which it's a little controversial. Like I definitely see like two sides of this, and I'd say in the shul setting, my strong preference is for the other choice. Like in the shul, I would love to have enough really good sidurim for everyone in the shul to have the same sidur, because that facilitates announcing on the second paragraph of page 42. And like it helps people follow along if you can announce pages and paragraphs, which you can only do if everyone has the same sidur or the same chumash. When it comes to the Seder, and when it comes to Birkat Hamazon, we have a whole drawer just of NCSY ventures, so that for Shabbat meals with like large numbers of people, we can say Birkat Hamazon begins on page 69, or we're going to sing Menucha V'Simcha, it's song 6 on page 13, whatever. We can facilitate that kind of participation. When it comes to the Seder, we take the opposite approach, and we have a vast Haggadah collection, and we sort of lay them out on a side table as people are arriving, and you select a Haggadah that you want to use, and I guess after the meal you can take the same one, or you can switch and take a different one. And I think that's because we just love collecting books, and we try to get a new Haggadah each year, and I love sort of exposing our guests to like the diverse range of Haggadot that we have. And it means that somebody is not fully engaged, at least they might be reading some interesting commentary and thinking about ideas. And we've also found that even though it's a little bit harder to follow along because everyone has different paginations and paragraph breaks and the translations are different, there's some like creative dissonance in where do you where are you going to read? And I'm going to, you have to it's also kind of engagement of paying attention to what that other person is reading and imagine, oh, that Haggadah must have the paragraph break in a different place, and etc. So that's what we've done, and I definitely see the challenges, but I think it's worth it. We find it worth it for the Sarim to have that. So this is another pedagogic choice. Let's mention a few Haggadot that as you grabbed a few on my way out the door. There's Rabbi Jonathan Sachs's Haggadah. The Hebrew half is basically a very easy to use, readable Haggadah with minimal commentary. And then from the English side, it is, I think, maybe like 10 or so really, really beautiful essays about Pesach. So I think the way we'd use this is you would get it a few days before Pesach, and you would read the essays in advance to kind of come to the Seder, immersed in these really relevant ideas, or you read them over the course of Pesach is 8 days. So like you read it over the course of the holiday, and then you have the Haggadah to actually use at the Seder. So you're not, but and just today, I think I believe this is now on Sefaria, so you could even print out a few essays, from home, or do some research in advance, and you don't have to. But like it's printed. The book version is meant to be used at the Seder, so that's great. Erica Brown's Haggadah is also similar. It has essays on one end and a fairly easy to use Haggadah on the other end. So in the Hebrew end, it's like a pretty user-friendly Haggadah. From the English end, it's essays. So again, you could read the essays in advance. You could read the essays over the course of Passover, but you could bring it to the table and also like have a user-friendly Haggadah. I'm trying to remember her Haggadah might also be on Sefaria. I don't remember, but Rabbi Sachs's definitely is. That was announced today. I got an email announcing it today. This is the Haggadah of Rabbi David Silber. He's, I don't know if people have met him or if he's ever spoken here or taught here. He founded Drisha in the late 1970s in New York City, among the most creative educators and thinkers that I've known. And So it's a very impressive Haggadah. Again, one half, like the Hebrew half, is a very like easy to use, minimal commentary, clear layout. Haggadah you bring to the table, and the English end is a series of essay shiurim, which again you would presumably read in advance as your preparation, or read over the course of the holiday to give you some more, for added meaning and added value. Okay, two more I'll show you. This was like a big deal a few years ago, the New American Haggadah. I don't remember. It came out, it got a lot of press. It got a lot of really negative reviews, actually. Like, I think somebody, I won't name it, wrote a scathing review and thought the translation was terrible and really mocked it. The translation by Nathan Englager, the novelist. And the reviewer really hated the translation. I kind of like it because the translation is kind of wacky and is definitely like a little bit awkward, but it's also it makes you think, right? Because it translates things in really different ways and unexpected ways. And so if you're engaging in English, the newness and unexpectedness of the translation kind of forces you to think. So I understand if you're like, that doesn't, if you're like thinking what makes a great translation. So like words being translated really new and unexpected ways, that's probably not what the guild of translators are looking for. But if you're one, a Haggadah, it's going to make you think. I think I find it like sort of neat in that regard. So we have a few copies that we got when it was published, and it's still, someone always picks one up at our house. And finally, this is like among the best recent Haggadah. This is the graphic novel Haggadah, which came out a couple of years ago. This is just phenomenal. This is he has a Megillat Esther that he did. And this is the first of the series that he did, was this Haggadah. It has the full text in Hebrew and English with really, really beautiful, compelling illustrations, just in the style of a graphic novel, both, that are trying to both depict the historical events that are described, but also to get with contemporary, a resonance as well. It's really, I find it really beautiful. It's incredibly, and so we have, I don't know, this is like our go-to like kids Haggadah. So we have, I don't know, 5 or 6 copies that children use. And it has the full text, so it's really, adult could use it too, and you could follow along. I think it's just, there are some other children's Haggadot that I've seen over. This is like, I think just like ahead above, like far, far beyond, just like sets the level for something totally new. So no, you shouldn't use any other one, any other kids Haggadah, in my opinion. I'm a big fan of it. Okay, so so what else? That's a few comments on pedagogy. I'll say one more pedagogy comment that also gets us into the halachic discussion. And that is, this was probably one of the biggest transformations of our Pesach, when we learned this and we thought this through again. And that was our introduction of a Karpas course, instead of just a Karpas bite. Karpas is a really interesting ritual. No one really knows like what it's for. It's sort of, there's no clear explanation, because there are many explanations of what it symbolizes and why we have a Karpas course as one of the stages of the Seder. There's a lot of uncertainty about that, or a lot of multiple opinions about that. And there is, and many Haggadot will instruct you to have less than a kazayit of karpas, you're nodding familiarity, to avoid, do you know why?
No, I don't remember.
Okay, that's fair. It's been a while. It's been almost a year. It's more than a year. It's been more than a year. The reason why, because of the reason why many recommend less than a kazayit is because to avoid the question of whether you need to say an after bracha, you say a Brei Pri Adama, you have a kazayit of karpas, maybe you should then say an after bracha, in which case you probably should say a new Brei Pri Adama, perhaps for the maror, even though you say the maror after hamotzi, because the maror might not count as the meal. So there's a lot of bracha questions, and if you know anything about especially Ashkenazi Orthodox Jews, we get really nervous about unnecessary brachot. And so as a way to avoid the possibility of should we not say an after bracha, we'll have less than a kazayit of karpas, and in that way, we'll avoid this. However, the Rambam suggests that you have to have at least a kazayit of karpas, because anytime you have a mitzvah to eat something, you have to have at least a kazayit. And so if karpas is in the Seder as a stage in the Seder, so you should have at least a kazayit. And the advantage, so there are poskim who say that you actually have to have a kazayit, and either you don't say it after bracha because you can keep nibbling on it, and then you can have in mind that it covers the maror as well, and you can keep keep nibbling on your karpas. And so we bring out a whole course of karpas. We find the advantage of it by the time you sit down. This time of year, especially this year with leap year, Kiddush is not, was like 8:30 or something, right? Yeah, right. So you make first cup is Kiddush at 8:30, and then Ma'agid is going to take you from 8:45 until 9:45 or 10, right? So by the time you actually get down, it could be very, very, very late by the time you eat karpas, and some people don't do so well with like extended hunger. So we found that once we invested in a karpas course, so people could just engage much more fully in what they were. Because karpas is before magid, right? So if you less than a kazayit of karpas, then you're starving all through magid. Some people, just that prolonged hunger makes them sick. By the time they have the matzah, their stomach already, before they had the matzah, the stomach is turning from hunger of not really eating for so many hours. So we bring out platters of karpas options. It stays on the table during magid, and then people are just able to participate in magid in a with much more just comfort, because their stomachs aren't growling in hunger. And then, you don't have to serve a salad course or something at the meal, or don't serve soup. I don't know. You can take out a course later if you want, to save time at the other end. But that's been really big for us. Karpas is anything that takes the bracha b'rei pri adama. So that is potatoes or parsley, but that's also potato chips. That's also strawberries. That's also bananas. So we bring, a whole bunch of, and some people did dipping strawberries in chocolate. You can be creative with your dipping as well. And that's also fun. So have fun and have fun with it. That has been it's been years already that we've been doing it. It's been more than 10 years we've been doing this, and it's been really transformative for our family and I think for our guests. So I endorse this wholeheartedly. Again, notwithstanding the halachic, I understand the the bracha question that pushes people in the other direction. I think what you gain though in this way is so much more. So I would I encourage you to try if you haven't done something like this yet. That leads me to the other sort of halachic, I think I'll just raise. And here I feel a little more conflicted. There is I don't know if you've ever been to a Seder where people have those charts for shiurim for how much matzah to eat, and there's laminated cards. You ever see? I don't know. Maybe I don't know. For years, I went to Sederim where they had laminated cards to show you precisely how much matzah to eat, how much maror to eat.
Well, the Lavitchers used to put that out.
Yeah. Okay. I'm sure. Sure. That's it. Yeah. I have a book actually with life-size pictures of as well of these shiurim. They're very, very big, and the reason why they're very big because in the 16th, 17th century, Rabbi Yehuda realized that the liquid volume measurements in the Talmud and the dry volume measurements in the Talmud didn't correspond. There was a discrepancy in the Talmudic system of weights and measures, specifically around volume. And the solution that he came up with to resolve the discrepancy was to assume that olives used to be bigger, and therefore eggs used to be bigger in ancient times. And so to take therefore, an olive, anything that's a kazayit, we should be double what we had assumed. Anything that's kibetza should be double. So you end up with the amount of matzah you should eat is maybe I don't know, 3/4 of a machine matzah. Is your achilat matzah, and then you should again for a karech, and so it's a massive quantities of eating that you're supposed to do without talking while reclining, and it can get very extreme. I was once as at a Seder once as a fellow at the table who was very strict about these shiurim, about these measurements. And he was also very strict about reclining. So he would just very exact, he would like really lean like quite far as he, without talking or any interruption, just like, like consumed like this massive quantity of matzah, crumbs flying all over the place, deep in his beard. It was quite, I guess, impressive, but it, certainly made an impression on me. But so here's the thing, though. We know that from like sort of archaeological findings that ancient olives were not any bigger than contemporary olives. They were the same size because we have olives that have survived from, like olive pits have survived from like Masada or something, like we can compare them to contemporary olives. We also have olive trees from, like there are 2,000. Oh, hello, it's Mitch. Hi, good to see you. Good to see you. Really good to see you. We have olive trees as well from 2,000 years ago, and they also have olives that are the same size as our contemporary olives. So we know archaeologically that olives have stayed the same size, and through the centuries, there have been quite a few poskim who have endorsed a smaller size of olive and debates at all of these measurements. So an olive size that you eat is the volume of an olive. Okay, and so that would be So personally, I'm convinced by the archaeology and the science of it, and certainly there are many great poskim through the generations who have endorsed that as well. But I also had some like really formative experiences of my life, like years when I spent Sedarim amongst people who had those laminated cards and gave really large shiurim. So I kind of feel like that's a little bit part of my tradition as well, and so that also. I find I'll say one other comment about that. Nobody looked. This is I some of you we've talked about this before. Chaim Soloveitchik wrote an article 25 years ago called "Rupture and Reconstruction." A very important book about contemporary Orthodoxy, and he made the point that nobody ever read a book to learn how to celebrate the Seder until the 20th century. Maybe it's exaggerating, but if you live in an intact traditional society, you would never need or think to look in a book to learn how much matzah should eat at the Seder, because my entire life, like my Zaidi, breaks off a piece of matzah and hands it to everyone at the Seder. And everyone I know in my shtetl or in whatever my city, they also had their Zaidi break off a piece of matzah and give it to them. And my Zaidi, he learned how to do that from his Zaidi before. And in an intact traditional society, like practices are passed down mimetically in that way by absorbing it from the culture around us. And mitzvot were like that too, in an intact traditional society. With World War I and certainly World War II, the breakdown of tradition, and before that even, but the breakdown of traditional Jewish society as Jewish observance is reconstructed in that sort of after the rupture, we don't have that sense of everyone I know has been doing mitzvah correctly for generations. And so whatever I grew up with must be correct. And instead, people look to books to find out what to do. When you look at books, sometimes you learn that the way you were doing things was wrong. And so it's really been it's a 20th century, mid-20th century phenomenon within Orthodoxy that we would have these massive quantities of matzah and really big Kiddush cups, et cetera, because if you look at books and you reason, okay, so it seems maybe these books are telling me I should be consuming more bigger Kiddush cups, that I should, eating more matzah. But in an intact society, no one would even ask what the books, and even people who wrote those books, right? We have the Mishnah Berurah, who wrote one of the. One last thing about this, and then I'll leave this topic. But in terms of this transition from a traditional society to a reconstruct, like an Orthodox society, you can see the divide in two early 20th century, late 19th century scholars, the Aruch HaShulchan and the Mishnah Berurah. The Aruch HaShulchan is maybe the last European halachic scholar. He wrote this encyclopedia of halacha. We read from it just at Mincha Marav today. This encyclopedia of halacha. He was a rabbi in Novordik, in a society that was still had intact traditions, he assumed that what like the frum people amongst whom he lived were doing was correct, and his job as a rabbinic scholar was to find justifications for what everyone else was doing. So even if the justification was a little bit far-fetched at times, that was his job, because like this is an intact, observant, firm, pious community. If they're practicing Judaism in this way, it must be okay. And like all of my scholarship, like that's just for me to explain why what everyone is doing is okay. Mishnah Berurah lives in a whole different, really only a few years later, but entirely different environment after World War I, after the breakdown of after the Russian Revolution and the breakdown of traditional Jewish society in Europe, and he does not have that assumption, and so he writes at what he thinks should be done, even if nobody's doing it. And in his lifetime, people didn't necessarily follow what he said, but starting in the 50s and 60s, and then spreading into, among growing segments of Ashkenazi Orthodoxy, the Mishnah Berurah becomes dominant as people don't have faith anymore that whatever I absorbed in my home must be correct. Let me look to books for guidance. So again, for me, like I feel like I started celebrating halachic sedarim among people who cared about these shiurim, and so that's some of my early childhood memories. Not my earliest childhood Seder memories, but many like formative years of sedarim through high school and college were with people who had laminated cards, and so that's sort of part of my own traditions that I feel attached to, even though intellectually I'm thoroughly convinced that the small quantity is completely fine. Another pedagogic point, which is also a halachic point, and that is timing of the sedarim. So and then after this, I think I will actually pause for questions. But if you have questions, you should put them in the chat in the meantime, and then we'll happy to hear whatever you have to say. I said to some who before some of you joined that advantage of if you ask questions today, that I have a chance to there's time for me to research the answer before Pesach. So if I don't, so that's good. The goal should be to ask questions I don't know the answer to, so I can help. Hopefully, we can get the answers together before Pesach comes. The mitzvot of the Seder are nighttime mitzvot, and that's from the Torah itself. Like the Torah really emphasizes that we left Egypt at night, that the Korban Pesach was eaten at night, shechted during the day, eaten at night. We put the blood over the door, and we spent the night leil shimurim in our homes, and to this day, right? That it's actually in the Haggadah itself, ba'avor zeh, right? That we tell the mitzvah telling the story, and the Seder rituals are nighttime rituals. That poses a challenge for the Northern Hemisphere in late April, where that means the first cup of wine is whatever it is, 8:30, 8:25, and that is right. That's a challenge. So I'll say a few things. So one is maybe it's a challenge like for older people, for younger people, for all of us really. So for those of us who can plan in advance, you take a nap before Pesach maybe, and try to be able to stay up late in that way. If your kids can take naps and stay up late, that's fine. I think it's okay. I think it's like a lot of the rituals of the Seder are designed with the idea of keeping your children up past their bedtime. That seems to be why we do some of the fun things at the Seder, because the assumption that we want our kids to stay up past their bedtime. At some point, you might put their kids to bed, which is also okay, right? Like we were very strict at bedtime when our kids were younger. That was like the only thing about parenting that we really were, I think, felt effective about and successful about. So there were years where we didn't keep our kids up when they were really little. We didn't keep them up very late at all. And we had a kids Seder at lunchtime the next day. And they took out their Haggadah that they made in school and preschool, and we did Korach and had Maror. We did all those things at lunchtime because they had their normal bedtime at 6 or 7 p.m. and the Seder started at 8:39, and that's just what it was for many years. And then later on, they learned to stay up late past their bedtime, and they would stay up as long as they could or as they made sense, and they went to bed, and that's okay. Many people find themselves at sedarim whose timing is not under their control. Maybe you're a guest at you're at Mildred's home and she's going to start the Seder at 5 p.m. or whatever, 6 p.m., whatever it might be. And others may choose that they want that it's more important to them that their kids are there for as much of the Seder as possible. So there are ways to finesse some of these issues. I wrote up a document, which upon request, I can share during that first COVID Pesach we called it a Seder in 2 parts, where you do like a whole bunch of rituals over Zoom before sunset, and then you say goodbye to your family, turn off your computers, light candles, daven Maariv, and then you do the second set of rituals after. So all the things that don't have to happen at night. So that includes singing Kadesh or Chatz. That includes some of the Seder songs, Dayenu, I think Manish Tana, the fun songs at the end, Chad Gadia, right? You could do many of these Seder rituals before sunset, and then after dark, then Kiddush, the core of Magid, and then eating matzah and maror and etc. So in that way, you can finesse things. If you're planning this, if you're in charge of the scheduling and you're working cooperatively with the person scheduling, that kind of model can work. I'm happy to one-on-one come up with some sort of plan and strategy and give you specific guidance on what that looks like. And if you're the guest at someone else's Seder and you don't really have any control, so then I think you can you go along with everyone else, and once it's dark, you pay attention to what time it is, and you make say Kiddush, and exactly. You make sure while everyone's eating their soup, you can reread a few passages of the Haggadah or something, and I think there's a way to make it work. I think usually when there's love and open communication and mutual respect, people are pretty and goodwill. People, that's effective for people. Yeah. So again, like this. Literally the name, like the order is in the name of the ritual. Like it is the Seder because there is an order to it. So I don't want to. I'm sort of reluctant to. I don't want to broadcast. Just play around with everything and redo the order from top to bottom to accommodate your schedule, because the nighttime aspect is there in the Torah itself, and the order of the rituals is like part of that. Even gave its name to the evening also, and yet, in fact, you can do your nighttime mitzvot and you can do your nighttime mitzvot and then but also with getting some like fun songs in or whatever before the kids go to bed or before the older people go to bed. Okay. Other questions from the chat. If your drinking glasses are just used for cold drinks, can they be used on Pesach? So the simple answer is yes, because they would not have come in contact with hot chametz. So there's no reason why that should be fine. The custom is to kasher them by putting them, like soaking them overnight in water for 3 days and changing the water every day. It's a little weird. It's weird. It sort of seems to be a compromise of different positions. So that's like a custom people do for their Pesach drinking glasses, but Ikar Din, like that shouldn't be fully needed. Second question, people using old yahrzeit candles as drinking glasses. Is that some people? That's like, of course, it used to be bigger. Okay, now they're too small. Okay. So that's I feel like that's some people hear that and they're like, that's disgusting, and some people hear that and like, of course, that's how we grew up. We always used yahrzeit candles for glasses. Okay, so that's a very, very polarizing question. Okay. Question for community Seder at a shul where you might need 30 to 40 people, would you still use a number of different Haggadah? I don't know. Look, at some point there is an advantage of being able to say we're all going to turn to page 15, and I guess but I don't know, like we probably have 40 different we probably have 40 Haggadot at our collection at this point, and to have, I think you could make it work. I don't think there's necessarily any limit on that. We've probably had close to 30 people at our house some years also. We used to have a very large home with an open floor plan, so we could have, we just keep adding tables into the living room, and so we could have, I think we had close to 30 some years. So so you can't say everyone turn to page 6. We would say now, okay, it's time for, Avadim Hayinu, go, whatever, and if you're, and people are helping the person next to them and they're, follow along in that way. And if it's your turn to read and you're like a little bit lost, so the person next to you says, oh yeah, here's the paragraph where we're at. Right? It's not so bad. So I think it's a style. I don't know. It's a style. I appreciate the diversity. I really enjoy it. So I definitely understand, but I understand the cost. So I don't think it's like necessarily one way. I was just sort of shared what we do. Any other questions? I'm trying to think if there's any. I feel like I've shared much of my wisdom. Any other questions Barry, go ahead. I think you're still muted. You're still muted. Go ahead. Yeah. Barry, you're still muted. You're still muted, Barry. I can't hear you. Still muted. You can't unmute yourself. But you can type if you want in the chat. If you want to type in the chat, try typing in the chat. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No, Mitch, you want to help him? You want to help him? Can you unmute yourself? Oh, you're still muted. You're still muted. You're still muted. Yeah. Okay. If you can't figure this out, you're still muted.
Okay.
Hi. Hey. Hello. Hello. Hi, Mitch. Hi there. Hey guys. How's it going?
You mentioned the olive and the gesite, and I was thinking back in earlier times, I had the impression that the olives were huge because there was a lot of oil, so they could have these things for the oil, whether it was the mincha or the menorah or what. They had to crush the oil, and they needed all this oil. So I thought maybe God provided for these large olives for that
Yeah.
thing.
So it seems
Maybe
that
took up the volume of the olive to some degree too.
yeah. So where is his yeah, so that might have been a theory, but it doesn't seem that that's true because we have olive trees that are 2,000 years old, and we can see what they look like. Right? They don't actually have olives that are bigger, and we can even take seeds from like ancient, that we've uncovered, and they also seem pretty. Yeah, here I'm kind of finding Nathan Slifkin wrote a really great article here. It's now some years ago, and where he goes through oh gosh, the actual book. He wrote a little booklet here. I'll send you. I'll put a link. You can if you want to follow up on this.
That'll be fine when you can. Anytime.
Yeah, there it is. Okay, so you can follow up. So he wrote a really great, like he did a lot of research on this topic, both the halachic research of collecting all of the scholars who do not who believe that the actual olives like we have is what they are, and as well as the archaeological botanical evidence as well. But interestingly enough, when you buy a can of olives and you see the serving size, it says sometimes 2 olives. So that's kind of funny. But anyway, Charlotte, yes, you're raising your hand, yeah. Charlotte Rest, yeah.
I wanted to go back to the one Seder where you participated and the one man who had very strict standards.
Yeah.
That he ate so much matzah.
Yeah.
So what is the halacha if there's any one source that says how much matzah you're supposed to eat?
Yeah. So that's meaning, in other words, the halacha is clear that you for motzi you should have a kibet. The volume of an egg is for motzi, and for the mitzvah of achilat matzah is would be just a kazayit, an olive volume. So that's clear. The question is, some have over the last centuries, some have come to the conclusion that actually translates into a much larger than we would imagine, like a egg or a olive volume to be, and so they end up eating, like half of a handmade matzah, or maybe a third, whatever it might, a substantial percentage of a machine matzah. So that is a halachic position. I think it's reasonable insofar it follows from first principles, again, kind of arising from this discrepancy in the Talmudic weights and measurement system. But I think historically we know that people ate much less. So I think if you're eating, like, if your matzahs are like an egg, like an actual egg, like of a chicken that like from your fridge, like, that would be that'd be enough. Yeah. Mitch,
Okay.
yeah, go ahead.
Thank you.
Yeah. I just want to repeat your story. When I got back from my first year in yeshiva, and I'm by my Zaydi Seder, and I have the sheet there, and I give him that big piece of matzah, I got yelled at. He said, my tata never did this. He gave me a piece of matzah. And his father was a huge Talmud Chacham. So I got yelled at. What are you doing there?
Yeah, that's a great story. It's a great story. I'll tell you another version of that. So the Mishnah Berurah, I mentioned before the Aruch HaShulchan, the Mishnah Berurah being the vanguard of this new system, but he himself didn't. So 2 stories of the Mishnah Berurah that my teacher Rabbi Yehuda Amital would say that when he was in yeshiva in Hungary before the war, they would read the Mishnah Berurah, who sometimes would say a Baal Nefesh, somebody who is especially sensitive in their soul, should act strict in this way or that way. And in yeshiva, they would read those passages and they'd say, oh, like a particularly pious person, like the Mishnah Berurah, the author of this book, he would maybe do, and then Rav Amital said that, whereas nowadays, like every kid in yeshiva thinks, oh yeah, that's me. I should be this Baal Nefesh. I'll be strict in this way. And it's not every stringency is appropriate for a teenager. Like some of them are maybe for a mature adult to take on after a lengthy process of spiritual discernment, not necessarily for every person. Now, about the Mishnah, he himself, nobody, you can't, it's harder to know the size of the matzah he broke off and handed to the people sitting at his table, but his Kiddush cup was passed down through the family. And some years ago, somebody found the Mishnah Berurah's Kiddush cup, and it was too small according to contemporary standards of how much wine, so that also is a great, Kiddush cups last a long time, right? They made of metal. So someone actually had, I think it was one of his daughter's children or something, had the grandfather's or the great grandfather's Kiddush cup, and people were astonished that his Kiddush cup was quote unquote too small. That it is what it is. Shai, I hope that answered your question. If not, I'm happy to elaborate more. But any other questions or about anything that I raised or anything I didn't raise? Okay. Say it again. Good night, Michael. Yeah, we'll have a thought and then we'll wrap up. Yeah, and then if you think of questions like tonight or tomorrow, send them to me. Okay, the sooner you get them to me, the sooner I can get back to you. Yeah, go ahead, Barry.
Certain families need
keep talking.
Certain families need the consistency, but some families are participatory, and I think the diversity of the Haggadot would stimulate that, because maybe the interpretations are different, or
I agree. Yeah, I find that really
exactly different thoughts, so it would be good.
Totally. Yeah, that's what I was trying to get at, Barry. I agree. In other words, there's a value in being able to say, everyone turn to page 6 and we're on the second paragraph. There's also a value of mine says, you say wicked child, mine says evil child, mine says chutzpahdik child, or whatever, and then we can have a conversation about what those different words mean and what the significance of those different words are. And that's really, I think that's really fruitful. And so, and you could do that. Look, for most of my childhood, I thought I didn't like charoset. And then some years ago, Sarah started making 4 or 5 different, Italian charosets and Turkish, and I was like, oh, this could actually taste good, and so I think it's nice to have, bring a whole bunch to the table. Why not bring more? I think that's, there's nice to have tradition and certain things that with the melodies and the foods that, that from our earliest memories. There's something nice about trying things new and having diversity and give people options. So that's so nice.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you all. Chag Hashem Sameach, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. And please be in touch leading up to Pesach if there are other ways I can be helpful. Have a good night, everyone.
Thank you.
Take care. Go up.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.